You make an avoidant fall in love not by moving toward them, but by standing still. That's the paradox most people never understand. With avoidant individuals, pursuit equals pressure. The more you reach, the more they retreat. The harder you try to prove your worth, the more they convince themselves that love is a threat they need to escape. But the secret isn't in chasing their heart. It's in becoming the kind of presence they can't ignore even in silence. Avoidants fall in love with emotional safety, not intensity. They fall in love with the person who doesn't try to invade their space, but quietly holds their own. They notice the one who doesn't panic when they pull away, who doesn't beg for connection, who simply remains calm, consistent, self-contained. To an avoidant, that composure feels foreign. It's unsettling at first, and then magnetic. Because what they truly crave, beneath all their distance and control, is someone who can love them without collapsing into them. When you stop chasing, you stop confirming their deepest fear. That intimacy always comes with demand. Your stillness tells a different story. It says, "You're free. I choose you, but I don't need you to choose me back to feel whole." And that level of emotional sovereignty does something powerful to the avoidant psyche. It makes them curious. Curious about you, about why your energy feels different, about why their usual patterns don't work on you. They start to feel something they can't control, attraction born from respect. They begin to think about you not as someone who wants to take something from them, but as someone who reflects what they've always wanted to feel, peace and connection. You become the exception to their emotional rule, not by playing games, but by refusing to play at all. If you want to make an avoidant fall in love without chasing, start by holding your ground. Let your silence be soft, not cold. Let your distance feel safe, not punishing. Love them by loving yourself enough to stay centered when they drift. That is where their walls begin to crack, not under pressure, but under peace. If you want to better understand how to deal with avoidance, then subscribe to the channel to know everything. Avoidants don't fall in love with effort. They fall in love with energy, with the quiet gravity of someone who doesn't orbit them, but creates their own center of gravity strong enough to pull them in, without trying. You see, the avoidance world is built on emotional control. Every wall, every withdrawal, every deflection of intimacy, it's all about safety. Their autonomy is their armor. They fear that closeness will erase them, that love will trap them, that need will turn them into something weak. So when someone comes along radiating need, urgency, or pursuit, their nervous system goes into defense. To them, chasing feels like danger. They don't see the love behind your effort, only the pressure inside it. But then they meet someone different, someone grounded, someone whose peace is not disturbed by silence, someone who doesn't take the distance personally, but also doesn't reward it with attention. This person isn't trying to change the avoidant. They're just being themselves, fully. And that's what changes everything. Self-containment is magnetic to the avoidant because it mirrors what they value most, independence, while offering what they secretly long for, connection. It shows them that intimacy doesn't have to cost them their freedom. When they see that you can love them and still belong to yourself, they begin to feel something unfamiliar, safe interest. They start to observe you more closely, not because you demand it, but because you don't. Every moment you choose calm over reaction, reflection over pursuit, you create contrast. You disrupt their emotional pattern, the one that expects panic, persuasion, and proof. Instead, you respond with quiet authenticity. That steadiness, that emotional self-possession, becomes the safest place they've ever felt near. And slowly, they lean in, not because they're convinced, but because they're curious. Not because you asked for closeness, but because your energy invites it. To make an avoidant fall in love, your calm must speak louder than their fear. Your boundaries must feel like safety, not distance. That's what draws them closer. Not pressure, not pursuit, but peace that feels real enough to trust. Avoidants don't trust words. They trust energy. They watch how you react when they pull away, not to test you consciously, but to confirm what they've always believed, that intimacy always ends in demand. And when you don't chase, you interrupt that belief in the most disarming way possible. When you stop chasing, something inside the avoidant shifts. At first, they might feel relief, the kind that comes when pressure disappears. But then comes the silence, the unexpected calm they didn't anticipate. You're not flooding their space with questions. You're not trying to win back their attention. You've simply stopped. And that quiet unsettles them, not because they feel abandoned, but because it's different. You didn't react the way everyone else did. They start to wonder where you went, not physically, but emotionally. Avoidants are used to controlling the rhythm of connection. Pull away, get chased, return when it's safe. It's a predictable cycle that keeps them in power. But when you stay still, that rhythm dies. Suddenly, they can't read you. And for someone who manages connection through control, unpredictability creates curiosity. They start checking your social media more often, thinking about what you're doing, replaying past interactions. They may not reach out right away, but the silence begins to echo in their mind. You've become a question they can't answer, not because you're withholding, but because your calm challenges everything they assume about love. Stillness isn't absence, it's presence without pursuit. It tells the avoidant, I see you, but I don't need to follow you to be seen. That subtle energy becomes a mirror they can't look away from. It's the emotional equivalent of someone looking you in the eye and not blinking. And when the avoidant starts to feel that discomfort, that awareness of your emotional independence, they begin to lean forward, not out of guilt, but curiosity. Who are you, really, if you don't need them? Why does your calm make their chaos louder? That's how love begins for the avoidant, in the stillness of someone who refuses to chase. Because what they can't control becomes what they can't forget. The reason stillness works isn't magic, it's reflection. Avoidants fall for people who quietly mirror back their truth, not their wounds. Your emotional independence shows them what they secretly wish they could be: free, calm, connected, and safe all at once. Avoidants spend most of their lives trying to control emotional chaos. They fear being consumed, so they stay distant. They fear rejection, so they reject first. But when they meet someone who doesn't play that game, someone who responds with presence instead of panic, they're faced with something rare, a relationship that doesn't cost them their identity. That reflection shakes them, because for the first time, they realize closeness doesn't have to mean loss. When you hold your ground, you're not teaching them through silence. You're showing them what emotional maturity looks like. You're modeling self-regulation, something they've never trusted love to offer. Your calm becomes the mirror in which they see their own defenses and their own longing. They might not articulate it, but inside, they feel the difference. Their nervous system begins to relax around you. You don't trigger their flight response because you don't demand fusion. You're showing that connection can exist without control. That's the most powerful emotional lesson an avoidant can experience, one that bypasses words entirely. In that space, affection grows quietly. It's not passionate pursuit or sudden declarations. It's subtle, a text that feels a bit softer, a tone that sounds more open, a question that digs. At first, the avoidant's curiosity is cautious. They're not ready to call it interest. That word feels too vulnerable, too exposing. But they notice. They notice your calm when they expect chaos. They notice your boundaries when they expect submission. They notice your peace, and it unnerves them. Avoidants are drawn to what they can't predict. Emotional control is their safety net, but you move differently. You don't mirror their distance. You don't react to their silences. You stay warm, but self-possessed. And that balance, that combination of openness and restraint, pulls them in. It's not attraction in the typical sense, it's recognition. They sense that you know something about connection that they don't. This is where the first real emotional shift happens. The avoidant starts to pay attention to your presence, even in absence. They start to think about what you might be doing, who you might be with, and more importantly, why your calm feels so unfamiliar. You're not indifferent. You're available, but not attached. You're affectionate, but not anxious. And that quiet confidence becomes an emotional language they start to understand, even if it terrifies them. Their usual methods, withdrawal, silence, control, stop giving them the comfort they used to. Instead of feeling safe in distance, they start to feel something else, disconnection. And that's the moment they realize that safety isn't the same as peace. Safety without intimacy feels empty. And you, with your emotional steadiness, have redefined what peace looks like. This is when they start inching closer. A text that comes sooner. A question that feels unexpectedly personal. A soft joke that replaces defensiveness. They'll test the water, not to manipulate, but to make sure it's safe to feel. They'll approach and retreat in cycles, not because they're unsure about you, but because they're unsure about themselves. And every time you meet their uncertainty with groundedness, not punishment, not need, you show them something revolutionary. That love doesn't have to chase or demand to be real. It can simply be. Your steadiness becomes their invitation. Your stillness becomes their permission. And in that space between their fear and your peace, something new begins. Connection built not on pursuit, but on quiet recognition. Falling in love for an avoidant doesn't happen in a rush. It happens in fragments. It's the quiet realization that they feel calmer around you than they expected to. It's the moment they reach out, not because they need to, but because they want to. And it's terrifying for them, because wanting feels like losing control. Avoidants associate love with danger. They've spent years training themselves to stay composed, self-sufficient, untouched. But your energy, steady, accepting, non-reactive, starts to disarm that defense. You don't try to convince them to stay. You simply make it safe for them to. That's what begins the softening. At first, it shows up subtly. They'll share something slightly more personal. A story they never tell. A quiet confession disguised as a joke. It might not look like vulnerability to you, but to them, it's a huge risk. Every time you meet it with calm understanding instead of overexcitement or analysis, you build trust. This trust doesn't come from comfort. It comes from consistency. Avoidants don't believe in words. They believe in patterns. They watch your reactions more than they hear your voice. So when you stay emotionally steady through their distance, when you don't collapse under their withdrawal, you're showing them something radical. Emotional safety doesn't mean losing power. It means sharing space without losing self. And that's when they start to feel something deeper, not just interest, but attachment. They might not name it love yet, but they'll start to act differently. Their absence feels shorter. Their return feels softer. They linger in conversations longer. They begin to look at you not as a potential threat, but as a place their nervous system can finally rest. But here's the key. If you try to speed this up, you break the spell. Avoidants don't respond to acceleration. They respond to permission. The permission to feel without being cornered. The permission to come close without being caged. So don't chase their vulnerability. Guard your own peace and let them approach it naturally. The softening of an avoidant heart isn't a performance. It's a quiet surrender to safety. And once that happens, love begins to root in places even they thought were unreachable. For most of their lives, avoidants have been masters of distance. Space is where they feel safe, where emotions don't threaten their stability. But once real connection starts to take hold, something unexpected happens. The same distance that once felt peaceful starts to ache. This is the stage where their detachment begins to betray them. They'll pull away, like they always do, expecting relief. But instead, they find restlessness. They notice the quiet feels heavier than before. Their solitude no longer feels like freedom, it feels like missing. And that realization is the first crack in the armor they've spent years perfecting. When an avoidant starts to miss you, it doesn't look like desperation. It shows up in subtle ways. Checking your profile, replaying old conversations, hovering in your messages without saying much. Their longing is silent, private, and deeply uncomfortable. They don't know how to hold it. They don't know if it's safe to admit it. But they feel it, and that's new. You see, the avoidance fear of intimacy isn't about disinterest. It's about regulation. Closeness overwhelms their system, so they escape it to breathe. But when they meet someone whose presence feels like peace instead of pressure, avoidance no longer brings relief. It brings regret. That's when their internal world turns against them, and longing begins to bloom. The beauty here is that your stillness allows that longing to grow. By not chasing, by not filling the silence, you give them space to feel it. You allow their emotions to find them. And for an avoidant, that's the only way love becomes real. It has to come from within, not from pursuit. Eventually, they start to realize something profound. They miss your steadiness, your calm, your grounded energy. Not because you soothed them, but because you didn't demand to. You represented a kind of intimacy that didn't cost them their independence. That memory stays with them. It haunts them softly. That's how an avoidant begins to fall in love. Not when you run after them, but when your absence makes them confront the truth. Connection doesn't feel like loss anymore. It feels like home. Once an avoidant starts to feel love, their instinct is not to celebrate it. It's to question it. Needing someone feels like danger. It threatens their identity as the one who never depends, never loses control. So even as their heart begins to soften, their mind begins to fight. They'll tell themselves stories to regain balance. I don't actually care that much. I need space. This isn't serious. It's not dishonesty, it's survival. They're trying to protect themselves from the vulnerability that love demands. Because love, to an avoidant, means exposure. It means letting someone have emotional power over them. And that's the one thing they swore they'd never allow. But the more they try to detach, the less it works. The image of you keeps returning. The memory of how calm you made them feel. The way your energy never demanded, never begged, never punished. You've become the first person they associate with peace, and that's what scares them most. Because peace means safety, and safety means trust, and trust means surrender. In this stage, they might act contradictory, pulling away, then returning, then withdrawing again. It's not manipulation, it's conflict. They're torn between two powerful instincts, protect and connect. They want you close enough to feel safe, but far enough to feel free. That push and pull isn't personal. It's the sound of their walls starting to fall. Your role here is not to fix it. It's to remain centered. If you chase, their fear wins. If you match their withdrawal with coldness, their shame deepens. But if you stay composed, empathetic, steady, and self-respecting, you show them something no one else has: love without pressure, affection without control. That's when they start to see you differently, not as someone who could take their freedom, but as someone who could walk beside it. They start to understand that needing someone doesn't mean losing themselves. It means finding safety in connection. This is the turning point. Because for an avoidant, love doesn't start when they want you. It starts when they realize they trust you. And that realization changes everything. Something subtle but profound happens when an avoidant begins to trust you. Their tone changes. The edges soften. The guardedness in their voice eases. They start to linger in conversations longer than they planned to. They start sharing small details they once protected like secrets. Not because you demanded transparency, but because your consistency made it feel natural. Trust, for an avoidant, is not built through promises. It's built through emotional safety. They watch how you handle their distance. They notice how you react to their silence. They study the moments when you could have taken things personally, but didn't. Every time you stay grounded instead of reactive, you send a message their nervous system has never believed before. I'm safe here. That's when emotional intimacy begins. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind that sneaks in during late-night talks or shared stillness. You might notice them opening up about their fears, their past, or moments they never processed. It won't come out as a confession. It'll slip through in fragments, disguised as casual remarks. But those fragments are everything. They're pieces of a wall being dismantled in real time. This is the stage where they begin to love without realizing it. They stop analyzing your motives and start simply enjoying your presence. They begin to initiate small things, but significant. They check in first. They share updates unprompted. They begin to think about your comfort, your feelings, your day. It's their quiet way of saying, "You matter to me." And yet, there's still fear. They'll feel it like a ghost in the background. The fear of losing you. The fear of being too much or not enough. But this time, they won't run from it. They'll stay, even when it's uncomfortable. That's how you know love has taken root. For the first time, connection feels like choice, not obligation. They're no longer managing you. They're meeting you. Not because they were convinced to change, but because you gave them space to find safety on their own. Love, for an avoidant, doesn't bloom in pursuit. It blooms in presence. And now, standing before someone they trust, they finally understand that closeness doesn't have to be a cage. It can be home. Here's the truth. You never made the avoidant fall in love by convincing them. You made them fall in love by being the one thing they never expected: safe. Not because you were passive or distant, but because you were steady. Because you didn't abandon yourself to prove your worth. You didn't mistake chaos for passion. You showed them what peace and connection feels like. When they look back, that's what they'll remember. Not the intensity, not the tension, but the quiet steadiness you carried when everything in them wanted to run. They'll remember how you didn't chase their silence, how you didn't punish their distance, how you simply held your ground, calm and clear, showing them that love doesn't have to suffocate to be real. Avoidants don't fall for people who overwhelm them. They fall for people who disarm them. And that's what you did. You became a mirror for what they didn't know they were missing. You reminded them that connection isn't loss, that love can coexist with freedom, that vulnerability isn't surrender, it's expansion. Now, here's the paradox most never understand. You don't keep an avoidant by holding tighter. You keep them by staying true to yourself. The moment you start chasing again, the dynamic resets. But when you remain grounded in your own worth, they find stability in you, not dependency. That's the foundation of secure love, the kind they never believed existed until you. So if you're wondering how to make an avoidant fall in love without chasing, remember this. Don't prove your value, embody it. Don't fill the silence, let it speak for you. Don't run after connection. Become the kind of peace they can't forget. Because love doesn't bloom in pursuit, it blooms in presence. And the one who refuses to chase becomes the one they can finally come home to. If this message spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, comment your thoughts, and let's keep uncovering what real love and real healing truly mean.